switch to Chinese. What the hell do we do?
Grant Whitmore was pacing, sweating. Raymond Zhao sat across the table, arms folded, waiting, speaking only Mandarin now.
Excuse me. I think I can help.
Get your dirty black ass out of here.
Sir, I understand what he's champed.
What, they teach Mandarin in the projects now?
Mr. Whitmore, Mr. Zhao feels disrespected. He's considering leaving.
Grant froze, looked at Tessa, looked at Zhao.
Fine. Do it.
He shoved her forward.
But if you cost me this deal, you'll pay for it!
And what came out of that maid's mouth next didn't just save the deal. It flipped the entire power dynamic in that room upside down. 3 months earlier, the Pendleton Resort and Spa sat on a stretch of Charleston coastline that most people only saw in magazines. White columns, wrap-around verandas, a lobby that smelled like fresh gardenias and old money. It was the kind of place where a single night cost more than some people earned in a month, where senators played golf on Sundays and tech billionaires booked the penthouse for quiet weekends that never stayed quiet. Tessa Turner arrived at 5:14 every morning. 14 minutes early, every single day. She parked her 12-year-old Honda in the staff lot behind the loading dock, the one spot where guests would never have to see a car like hers. She changed into her navy blue uniform in the basement locker room, clipped her name badge on the left side, tucked a small leather notebook into her apron pocket, and then she disappeared. That was the trick of being a maid at the Pendleton. You had to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Scrub the marble floors before the guests woke up. Replace the towels before anyone noticed they were gone. Polish the brass railings until they looked like they'd never been touched. Be invisible. That was the job. Tessa was good at it. 34 years old, slim build, hair pulled tight under a regulation headband. She moved through hallways like a shadow. Quiet feet, quick hands, eyes down. The other housekeepers liked her. Rosa, who worked the third floor, always saved her a coffee. Dennis from maintenance waved every morning. Even the front desk staff nodded when she passed. But nobody really knew her. They knew she was reliable. They knew she never called in sick. They knew she picked up extra shifts whenever they were available. They knew she kept to herself during breaks, sitting alone in the service corridor, writing in that little notebook. Nobody ever asked what she was writing. If they had, they would have found pages filled with characters. Not English characters. Mandarin, Arabic, Portuguese. Neat columns of vocabulary, grammar notes in the margins, conjugation tables drawn with the precision of someone who'd done this for years. But nobody asked, because at the Pendleton, the help didn't have hobbies. The help didn't have stories. The help had mops and schedules and a back entrance so the guests wouldn't have to share an elevator with them. Tessa understood this. She'd understood it from her first day, 8 months ago, when the head of housekeeping handed her a master key and said, "You'll learn fast. The most important thing here is that nobody knows you exist." She'd smiled, said, "Yes, ma'am," and she'd meant it. Not because she believed she was invisible, but because invisible was safe. Invisible meant no trouble. Invisible meant a steady paycheck, and a steady paycheck meant her mother's medication, her mother's doctors, her mother's chance at another year. So Tessa Turner mopped floors, changed sheets, cleaned toilets, and every night she went home and spoke Mandarin to her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Nobody at the Pendleton had any idea. Not yet. Grant Whitmore had been the food and beverage manager at the Pendleton for exactly 6 months. Before that, he'd been an assistant manager at a mid-range Hilton in Atlanta, the kind of property where the carpet smelled like chlorine and the continental breakfast ran out of eggs by 8. But Grant had a gift, not for hospitality, for politics. He knew whose hand to shake, whose joke to laugh at, whose wife to compliment at the company Christmas party. He'd climbed from front desk clerk to assistant manager in 4 years, not because he was talented, but because he was strategic. He studied the people above him the way a pickpocket studies a crowd. When the Pendletons' previous F&B manager retired, Grant applied. He had no fine dining experience, no luxury resort background. His interview performance was, by all accounts, mediocre, but he played golf with the regional VP's brother-in-law. He got the job. From day one, Grant carried himself like a man who'd been born into authority. Crisp suits, loud voice, a handshake that lasted 2 seconds too long. He walked through the hotel like he owned it, chest out, chin up, eyes scanning for anyone who wasn't moving fast enough. The staff learned quickly. Grant didn't manage, he controlled. He didn't give feedback, he gave orders. And he had a particular talent for finding the one person in the room with the least power and making sure everyone knew it. That person was usually Tessa. It started small, reassigning her to the worst tasks, scrubbing the kitchen grease traps, cleaning the dumpster area in August heat. Jobs that weren't even in her department. When she finished, he'd inspect her work with a flashlight, running his finger along surfaces, holding it up like a surgeon checking for contamination. Do it again. Always those 3 words. No matter how clean it was. Do it again. Then it got worse. One Tuesday afternoon, a group of corporate clients were touring the banquet hall. Tessa had spent 4 hours setting it up. Napkins folded, glasses polished, centerpieces aligned to the millimeter. It was flawless. Grant walked in, looked around, turned to the clients and smiled. My apologies, folks. The help hasn't finished yet. He looked at Tessa. Start over. All of it. The clients watched. Tessa watched the clients watching. Nobody said a word. She dismantled every table setting and rebuilt it from scratch. Took another 3 hours. When she finished, it looked identical to the first version. Grant didn't come back to check. He never intended to. The inspection was never the point. The humiliation was. The other staff whispered about it. Rosa said she should report him to HR. Dennis said he'd seen this before. Guys like that don't stop until somebody stops them. Tessa said nothing. She needed this job. Needed the health insurance. Needed the steady schedule that let her be home by 4 to give her mother her evening medication. Helen Turner was 61 years old. 2 strokes in 3 years. The doctors said a third one was a matter of when, not if. So Tessa swallowed it. Every do it again. Every flashlight inspection. Every time Grant called her, "You there?" instead of her name. She swallowed it all. And every night she went home, sat beside her mother's bed, and read aloud from a book of French poetry, translating each line into English as she went. Helen would smile. She didn't understand the French, but she understood her daughter. Some people are going to try to make you small, Helen said one night, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't you let them, baby. Don't you dare. Tessa closed the book, kissed her mother's forehead. I won't, Mama. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen where the refrigerator hummed louder than the television. It sat on the 2nd floor of a walk-up on King Street, the cheap end where tourists never wandered. But it was clean, and it was theirs. Every evening Tessa came home at 4:15. She hung her uniform on the hook behind the bathroom door, changed into sweatpants and a faded Howard University t-shirt, the one with the cracked lettering that she refused to throw away. Then she became someone else. The kitchen table was her classroom. Stacked on one side, a Mandarin textbook with a cracked spine, a French grammar workbook, a Japanese phrase book filled with sticky notes, an Arabic dictionary so worn the cover had separated from the binding, a Portuguese audiobook loaded on a phone with a cracked screen. 6 languages, fluent in 6, working on a 7th. It hadn't happened by accident. Her father, James Turner, was a structural engineer. Brilliant man. Quiet man. The kind of man who could calculate load-bearing stress in his head, but couldn't make small talk at a barbecue. When Tessa was 7, his company sent him to Tokyo for a 5-year infrastructure project. He brought his family. Tessa learned Japanese the way children learn everything, by being surrounded by it. She was fluent by 9. By 11, she was translating for her father at grocery stores, banks, parent-teacher conferences. Her mother was born in Port-au-Prince, grew up speaking Haitian Creole and French, moved to the States at 19, earned a teaching degree, spent 26 years teaching French at a public high school in Charleston. Every night at the dinner table, Helen spoke French. James answered in English. Tessa answered in both. College came with a full scholarship, linguistics major at Georgetown. That's where Mandarin entered the picture. 4 years of intensive study, a summer in Beijing, and a natural ear that her professors called once in a decade. Arabic came next, a postgrad certificate, then German on her own, because a freelance translation agency needed someone for a pharmaceutical contract. By 28, Tessa Turner was pulling in 6 figures as a freelance interpreter. Corporate deals, embassy events, medical conferences. She once translated a live negotiation between a German automaker and a Saudi investment group, simultaneously, in real time, switching between 3 languages without pausing. Then Helen had her first stroke. Everything stopped. The freelance work dried up. You can't fly to Geneva when your mother can't feed herself. The savings went to medical bills. The Georgetown contacts stopped calling after the 3rd declined invitation. 8 months ago, Tessa walked into the Pendleton and applied for the only position available. Housekeeping. Minimum wage plus tips she never received. The hiring manager glanced at her resume and frowned. "You're overqualified." Tessa said, "I just need steady hours and health insurance." She got the job. Lost everything else. Now, every night, after her mother fell asleep, Tessa sat at that kitchen table and studied Portuguese. Not because she needed it, because it was the only thing that still felt like her. The notebook in her apron wasn't a diary. It was a lifeline. The email arrived on a Wednesday morning. Subject line, confidential, VIP, arrival protocol. Eleanor Ashford, the Pendleton's general manager, sent it to every department head at 6:47 a.m. By 7:15, the entire hotel was vibrating. Raymond Zhao, founder and CEO of Tiansheng Capital. Net worth, somewhere between 11 and 14 billion, depending on which magazine you believed. The man had bought 3 luxury resorts in Europe in the past 2 years. Now he was looking at American properties. He was looking at the Pendleton. The deal on the table? A full acquisition. Zhao's company would purchase the hotel, invest $43 million in renovations, and turn it into the flagship of a new luxury brand targeting international travelers. For Eleanor Ashford, this was the call she'd been waiting for her entire career. The kind of deal that turned a regional GM into a national name. She called an emergency meeting at 8 a.m. Every department head, conference room A, no exceptions. 3 days, she told them. Mr. Zhao will be here for 3 days. Everything, and I mean everything, needs to be flawless. I don't want a single wrinkle on a single sheet on a single bed. I don't want fingerprints on the elevator buttons. I want this hotel to look like it was built yesterday and run by God himself. Grant Whitmore sat in the front row, nodding aggressively. I'd like to handle the hospitality coordination personally, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I've worked with international clients before. I understand the cultural nuances. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. What international clients, Grant? The Nakamura Group, last year, at the Hilton. Eleanor didn't point out that the Nakamura Group was a mid-level Japanese tour operator who'd booked 30 rooms for a weekend. She just nodded. Fine. You're on point for F&B during his visit. Grant smiled the way a man smiles when he thinks he's won something. The logistics were mapped out. A Mandarin interpreter had been contracted, a professional from a firm in New York. She'd arrive Thursday morning, same day as the formal negotiations. Zhao, however, arrived Wednesday evening, 1 day early. He came with 2 assistants and no entourage, no fanfare. He walked through the lobby in a dark gray suit, carrying his own briefcase, and checked in without using his full title. The front desk clerk didn't recognize him until she saw the reservation flag on her screen. Eleanor was called down immediately. She greeted him in the lobby, apologized for not having the full welcome protocol ready. Zhao waved it off. "I prefer to see places when they're not performing for me," he said in English. Perfect English. Slight British accent. He'd done his MBA at Oxford. Grant appeared 17 minutes later, tie straightened, hair freshly combed. He shook Zhao's hand with that 2-second too long grip. "Mr. Zhao, an absolute honor. If there's anything you need, anything at all, I'm your guy." Zhao looked at him, said nothing, nodded once. That night, Tessa was on the late cleaning rotation for the VIP floor. She passed Zhao's suite on her way to the supply closet. The door was ajar. She heard him on the phone. He was speaking Mandarin. Fast, fluid. The dialect was crisp. Textbook Beijing pronunciation with a slight Tianjin edge. She recognized it instantly. She paused for half a second, then kept walking. She didn't think about it again. She should have. Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Conference Room B, the big one, with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. Eleanor sat at the head of the table. To her left, the CFO, Richard Bellamy. To her right, 2 attorneys from the hotel's legal team. Grant Whitmore had positioned himself directly across from Zhao's seat, center stage, exactly where he wanted to be. Raymond Zhao entered at 9:02 with his 2 assistants. He wore the same understated gray suit, no watch, no cufflinks. The only thing on the table in front of him was a single leather folder. The meeting began in English. The first 40 minutes went smoothly. Eleanor presented the hotel's financials. The CFO walked through occupancy rates, revenue per room, seasonal projections. Zhao listened, took no notes, asked 3 questions, all sharp, all specific, all in English. Grant contributed nothing of substance, but he nodded at everything, smiled at every one, made sure his water glass was always full, and Zhao's was never empty. Then the conversation shifted. Zhao opened his leather folder. Inside were documents, dense, multi-page contracts. He turned to his senior assistant, a woman named Lin Wei, and began speaking in Mandarin. Fast Mandarin. Technical Mandarin. The kind loaded with financial terminology and legal clauses. Eleanor glanced at Grant. Grant glanced at the empty chair where the interpreter was supposed to be sitting. The interpreter. Right. She'd called at 7:30 a.m. Car trouble on I-26. Flat tire, waiting for a tow. She'd be there by 11, maybe 11:30. Grant had said, "No problem. Zhao speaks perfect English." Now, Zhao was not speaking English. Lin Wei translated a few of his comments, broad strokes, summaries. But Zhao kept going, deeper into the documents, pointing at specific clauses, asking his assistant questions that Lin Wei relayed as simplified versions. Then Zhao turned, looked directly at Grant, and asked him a question in Mandarin. Grant's face went white. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that in English, Mr. Zhao?" Zhao didn't repeat it. He asked a different question, still in Mandarin, slower this time, as if testing whether the speed had been the problem. It wasn't. Grant looked at Eleanor. Eleanor looked at the attorneys. The attorneys looked at each other. The room had 6 people on the Pendletons' side, and not one of them understood a single word. Lin Wei leaned toward Zhao and whispered something. Zhao's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. He set down his pen. Eleanor's phone buzzed under the table. She typed a message to the front desk manager. "Find someone who speaks Mandarin, right now. Check every department, every staff member. I don't care if they're a dishwasher. Get them up here." The front desk manager forwarded the message to housekeeping, maintenance, kitchen, spa, and groundskeeping. Grant tried to fill the silence. "Mr. Zhao, I want to assure you that our interpreter will be here shortly. In the meantime, if you'd like to continue in English." "Mr. Whitmore." Lin Wei's voice was polite but firm. "Mr. Zhao conducted this portion of the discussion in Mandarin intentionally. He feels that a property marketing itself to international clientele should demonstrate international capability. He is evaluating." The word hung in the air like smoke. Evaluating. This wasn't a language barrier. This was a test. And the Pendleton was failing it. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Richard Bellamy closed his laptop, a surrender gesture he probably didn't realize he was making. Grant was sweating through his shirt. $43 million. 3 days of preparation. 6 months of negotiations to get Zhao through the door. All of it. Evaporating in real time because nobody in the room could speak the man's language. And then, from the hallway, through the door that someone had left 2 inches open, footsteps. Soft footsteps. The kind made by rubber-soled shoes on hardwood floors. The kind made by someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Tessa had been wiping down the hallway console table when she heard it. Not the English. She'd tuned that out hours ago. The hum of corporate voices was just background noise on the VIP floor. But when Zhao switched to Mandarin, something in her brain clicked on like a light switch. She stopped wiping, stood still, listened. He was talking about Clause 7 of the acquisition contract. Specifically, he was asking about the liability transfer structure, whether the Pendleton's existing insurance framework would survive the ownership transition or need to be rebuilt from scratch. It was a good question, a critical question actually, the kind that could stall a deal for weeks if answered wrong. And nobody in that room was answering it. She heard Grant's voice, stiff, too loud, overcompensating. Then Lin Wei's diplomatic translation. Then silence. The kind of silence that meant the room was drowning. Tessa set down her cloth, walked to the door. It was open just enough to see inside, the long table, the ocean view, Grant's sweat-stained collar, Eleanor's rigid posture, and Raymond Zhao sitting perfectly still, waiting. She could walk away. She should walk away. This wasn't her meeting. This wasn't her world. She was a maid in rubber gloves, and there were 6 executives in that room with 6-figure salaries, and not one of them could do what she could do right now. Walk away, Tessa. She pushed the door open. Every head turned. 8 pairs of eyes landed on the navy blue uniform, the apron, the name badge, the cleaning cart visible behind her in the hallway. Grant reacted first. "What the hell are you doing? Get out! Now!" Tessa didn't look at him. She looked at Raymond Zhao, and in Mandarin, clear, measured, Beijing Standard Mandarin, she said, "Mr. Zhao, regarding your question about the liability framework in Clause 7, the existing coverage is structured as a blanket policy under the parent company. In an acquisition scenario, it would typically require renegotiation with the underwriter within 90 days of transfer. I believe that's what your team is trying to clarify." The room didn't breathe. Raymond Zhao stared at her for 3 full seconds. Then he leaned forward. He responded in Mandarin, faster this time, more technical. He asked about the indemnification clause, whether the hotel had carved out specific exclusions for natural disaster liability. Given Charleston's hurricane exposure, Tessa answered without hesitating. She cited the standard framework for coastal property insurance in South Carolina, referenced the difference between named storm deductibles and standard deductibles, and noted that most luxury properties in the region carried supplemental flood coverage through private markets rather than FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program. Zhao's eyebrows rose. Just slightly. But for a man who controlled his expressions the way a surgeon controls a scalpel, it was the equivalent of a standing ovation. He asked a third question, then a fourth, each one more complex than the last. Each time Tessa responded, calm, precise, fluent. She didn't stumble. She didn't pause to search for words. She spoke the way a native speaker speaks, not translating in her head, but thinking in the language itself. Grant stood up. This is completely inappropriate. She's a cleaning lady. She has no authority to— Sit down! Eleanor's voice cut through the room like a blade. She didn't look at Grant. She looked at Tessa. And in that look was something Tessa hadn't seen from anyone at the Pendleton in 8 months. Recognition. Please, Eleanor said. Continue. Zhao nodded. He gestured to the empty chair beside Lin Wei. Please, sit. Tessa sat. The maid sat at the negotiating table, still in her uniform, still with the name badge, still with the faint smell of cleaning solution on her hands. And for the next 40 minutes, she translated. Every clause, every term, every question, and every answer. Zhao spoke in Mandarin, the Pendleton's team spoke in English, and Tessa Turner, the woman who cleaned their toilets, bridged the gap as if she'd been doing it her entire life. Because she had. Grant Whitmore sat in the corner of the room, silent, watching a maid do what he'd told Eleanor he could handle. He didn't say another word for the rest of the meeting. The morning session ended at 12:15. Zhao suggested a break. Eleanor agreed, mostly because she needed 15 minutes to process what she'd just witnessed. But Zhao wasn't done testing. During the break, he made a phone call. Speaker on. The voice on the other end spoke French. Rapid, idiomatic, Parisian French. The kind spoken by someone who'd grown up on the left bank, not learned it from a textbook. Zhao spoke back in French. His accent was functional but stiff, serviceable for business, but clearly not his strongest language. He turned to Tessa, still sitting at the table, still in her uniform. Est-ce que vous comprenez? Do you understand? Tessa looked at him and answered in French so smooth, so effortless, so perfectly accented that Lin Wei, who spoke 3 languages herself, physically leaned back in her chair. Oui, Monsieur Zhao, parfaitement. Zhao's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, with curiosity. The kind of curiosity a chess player feels when an opponent makes a move they didn't anticipate. He picked up the phone again, dialed another number. This time, the voice spoke Japanese. Zhao turned to Tessa, didn't say a word, just looked at her. Tessa listened to the voice on the phone for 10 seconds. Then she translated, from Japanese to English, without missing a beat. The caller was discussing shipping logistics for a tech component supplier in Osaka. She caught the dialect, Kansai, not standard Tokyo, and adjusted her translation accordingly. The room had gone completely still. Eleanor's hands were flat on the table. Richard Bellamy had forgotten he was holding a pen. The 2 lawyers were staring at Tessa like she'd just pulled a sword from a stone. Zhao ended the call, sat back, folded his arms. How many languages? He asked, in English this time. 6, Tessa said. Fluent in 6, working on a 7th. Which 6? English, French, Mandarin, Japanese, Arabic, German. And the 7th? Portuguese. Zhao nodded slowly, the way a man nods when he's recalculating everything he thought he knew about the room he's sitting in. He turned to Lin Wei and said something in Japanese, quiet, almost a whisper. Lin Wei, who had spent 8 years as a professional interpreter in Tokyo before joining Zhao's team, responded in Japanese. Just one sentence. Tessa heard it. She wasn't supposed to, but she did. Lin Wei had said, "Her pronunciation is better than most professional interpreters I've worked with." Tessa didn't react, didn't smile, didn't flinch. She sat in her cleaning uniform with her hands folded on the table and waited for the next question. But inside, somewhere behind the composure, behind the 8 months of mopping and scrubbing and do it again, something shifted. Something that had been locked away was finding its way back to the surface. Grant Whitmore watched all of this from his corner. He hadn't spoken in over an hour. His face had cycled through white, red, and now a kind of gray that made him look 10 years older. He pulled out his phone under the table and typed a message to his assistant. Pull her employment file. Now. Everything. He wasn't looking for her qualifications. He was looking for something to use against her. Eleanor, meanwhile, had already sent her own message to HR. 2 words. Full resume. Same woman, same file. 2 very different reasons for wanting to see it. The afternoon session resumed at 1:30. Zhao switched between Mandarin, English, and French freely, sometimes mid-sentence, and Tessa followed every turn. She didn't just translate words, she translated intent. When Zhao softened his tone in Mandarin to signal flexibility on a clause, she conveyed that softness in English. When he hardened in French to push back on a pricing structure, she matched the edge. She wasn't just bridging languages, she was bridging people. And every person in that room knew it. That evening, Raymond Zhao did something nobody expected. He invited Tessa to dinner. Not in the hotel restaurant, not at the formal dining table with Eleanor and the legal team. He reserved a private table on the terrace, the one overlooking the salt marshes where the light turned gold at sunset, and asked Tessa to join him, just the 2 of them. Eleanor approved it immediately. Grant was not informed. Tessa showed up in the only nice clothes she had at her locker, a black blouse and gray slacks she kept for parent-teacher meetings at her mother's care facility. She'd washed her hands 4 times to get the cleaning solution's smell out. It hadn't fully worked. Zhao noticed, didn't mention it. They ordered. Zhao ate simply, grilled fish, steamed vegetables, green tea. Tessa ordered the same. Not because she wanted to mirror him, because it was the cheapest entree on the menu, and she didn't know if she was expected to pay. Zhao spoke first, in Mandarin. You don't belong in a cleaning uniform. It pays the bills. So does a lot of things. Why this? Tessa set down her fork, looked at the marshes. The egrets were wading in the shallow water, unhurried, indifferent to everything. My father was an engineer, she said, still in Mandarin. Structural engineering. He wasn't famous, wasn't rich, but he was brilliant. He got sent to Tokyo when I was 7. 5 years. I went to a Japanese elementary school. By the time we came back to the States, I dreamed in 2 languages. Zhao listened without interrupting. My mother taught French. 26 years at the same public school. She grew up in Haiti. French was her first language. She made sure it was my second. And Mandarin? Georgetown, full scholarship, linguistics. I had a professor, Dr. Yu Wen, who told me I had the best tonal ear he'd heard in 30 years of teaching. He pushed me. Summer program in Beijing. I came back thinking in Mandarin. Arabic, German? Arabic was a postgrad certificate. German I taught myself for a pharmaceutical translation contract. Turns out, when you already speak 4 languages, the 5th comes faster, and the 6th comes faster than that. Zhao nodded. He understood the principle. He spoke 4 languages himself, Mandarin, English, French, and enough Japanese to survive a board meeting in Tokyo. So what happened? He asked. How does a Georgetown-trained polyglot end up mopping floors in Charleston? Tessa's hands went still. My mother had a stroke. 3 years ago. Then another one, 18 months later. The doctors say a third is coming. It's just a question of when. She paused. I was freelancing, interpreting, flying to conferences, embassies, corporate negotiations, making good money. But you can't fly to Geneva when your mother can't get out of bed. So you came home. So I came home. The savings went to medical bills. The contacts dried up. And 8 months ago, I walked into this hotel and took the only job that offered health insurance and hours flexible enough to get me home by 4 for her evening medication. Zhao was quiet for a long time. The sun had dropped below the tree line. The marshes had gone from gold to silver. I grew up poor, he said finally, in English now. A village outside Tianjin. My father repaired bicycles. My mother sold noodles from a cart. I know what it's like to have people look at you and see nothing. He picked up his tea. Talent doesn't disappear because the world stops looking for it. Tessa didn't respond. She didn't need to. It was the first time in 8 months that someone had looked at her, really looked, and seen what was actually there. They finished dinner in silence, the comfortable kind. Friday morning, day 3, the final session. This was it. Zhao would either sign the letter of intent or walk. $43 million decided in a single meeting. Eleanor arrived at 8:30, dressed sharper than the previous 2 days, navy blazer, pearl earrings, hair pulled back tight. She looked like a woman who hadn't slept but refused to show it. Tessa was already there. Eleanor had personally called her the night before and asked her to attend the final session as the primary interpreter. Not the contracted professional who'd finally arrived Thursday afternoon and sat awkwardly in a corner while Tessa ran the show. You'll be compensated for this, Eleanor had said on the phone. Just tell me what time, Tessa replied. Grant arrived at 8:45. He walked into the conference room and saw Tessa seated at the table, not standing, not serving. Seated, with a notepad and pen positioned directly beside Eleanor. His jaw tightened. He pulled Eleanor aside in the hallway. This is a mistake. She's housekeeping staff. She has no training for this. What if she mistranslates something and Zhao walks? Eleanor looked at him. She translated flawlessly for 6 hours yesterday, Grant. In 3 languages. That's exactly my point. Grant lowered his voice. We don't know her. We don't know where she learned this. For all we know, she's feeding Zhao information on the side, playing both ends. Eleanor's expression didn't change. Do you have evidence of that? I'm saying it's a risk. Noted. She walked back into the room. Grant followed. He had one more card to play. The session began at 9 a.m. Zhao came in with a different energy, lighter. He greeted Tessa in Mandarin before acknowledging anyone else. It was a small gesture. Everyone noticed. The first hour went smoothly, back and forth between English and Mandarin. Tessa translated at a pace that made Lin Wei, a professional with 8 years of experience, watch with a mix of admiration and something close to envy. Then Grant made his move. During a break at 10:15, he stood up and addressed the room. He looked directly at Zhao. Mr. Zhao, before we proceed, I want to flag something for full transparency. His voice was steady, rehearsed. I reviewed our interpreter's employment file last night. Ms. Turner was hired 8 months ago as a housekeeper. Her background was not vetted for a role involving confidential financial negotiations. I've identified several discrepancies in her file that I believe warrant— What discrepancies? Eleanor cut in. Grant hesitated. He didn't have discrepancies. He had a file that showed a woman with a linguistics degree from Georgetown and 4 years of professional interpreting experience who'd taken a cleaning job to pay for her mother's medical care. I just think we should exercise caution when— Mr. Whitmore. Zhao's voice was quiet. The room went silent. Yesterday, Miss Turner translated over 6 hours of complex financial and legal discussion across 3 languages. She did so without preparation, without notes, and without a single error. He paused. In fact, she identified an ambiguity in Clause 7's indemnification language that your own legal team missed. My attorneys confirmed it this morning. Her catch potentially saved both parties from a liability gap worth several $1,000,000. Grant's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Zhao continued. So, when you say discrepancies, I want to be very clear about what I observed. I observed a woman who was brought in to clean a room and instead saved the negotiation inside it. If there is a discrepancy here, Mr. Whitmore, it is between Miss Turner's position and her capability. He turned to Eleanor. I'd like to continue, without further interruptions. Eleanor nodded. Grant, outside. Now. Grant walked out of the conference room. The door closed behind him with a click that sounded to everyone inside like a verdict. The session resumed. Zhao turned to Tessa and said in Mandarin, Now, where were we? Tessa smiled. For the first time in 2 days, she smiled. Clause 12, Section B. You had concerns about the renovation timeline. Ah, yes. Zhao picked up his pen. Let's fix that. The session ended at 2:47 p.m. Raymond Zhao closed his leather folder, set his pen on the table, and looked at Eleanor Ashford. I'll sign the letter of intent, he said. Today. Eleanor exhaled. It wasn't visible. She was too composed for that, but the tension left her shoulders like a wave pulling back from shore. However, Zhao continued, I have one condition. The room held its breath. Zhao turned to Tessa. This hotel is about to become an international property. My guests will come from Beijing, Tokyo, Paris, Dubai, Sao Paulo. You need someone who can speak to all of them, not just smile and point at a menu. He looked back at Eleanor. I want Ms. Turner heading your international client relations. New department, new title, full authority over multilingual guest services and international partnership communications. Eleanor didn't hesitate. Done. I'm not finished. Zhao's voice stayed even. I also want to understand how someone with her qualifications was cleaning rooms for 8 months without anyone in your management team noticing. That tells me something about your leadership structure that concerns me. The silence that followed was heavier than anything that had come before. Eleanor nodded. You're right, and that will be addressed. It was. By Monday morning, HR had opened a formal internal review. Not because Eleanor told them to, though she did, but because the moment the story spread through the hotel, people started talking. And once they started, they didn't stop. Rosa, from housekeeping, was first. She filed a written complaint about Grant Whitmore, 3 pages, single-spaced. She documented 14 separate incidents of verbal abuse, racial targeting, and punitive task reassignment over a 9-month period. Dennis from maintenance filed next, then 2 line cooks, then a laundry attendant named Sophie who'd quit 3 months earlier and drove 2 hours back to Charleston specifically to submit her statement. She sat in the HR office for 45 minutes, hands shaking, and described in detail how Grant had called her the help's help in front of a dining room full of guests. The pattern was clear. Grant didn't just target Tessa, he targeted anyone he perceived as beneath him, and his perception of beneath correlated directly with skin color, accent, and immigration status. HR completed their investigation in 11 days. The findings were unanimous. Grant Whitmore was stripped of his management title. His salary was cut by 40%. He was reassigned to inventory management in the basement storage facility, cataloging linens, counting soap bars, organizing supply shipments. The same work he'd made Tessa do as punishment. The irony wasn't subtle. Nobody pretended it was. On his first day in the new role, Grant walked down to the basement and found his workspace: a metal desk, a folding chair, a clipboard, and a bare bulb overhead. The room smelled like detergent and damp concrete. No window, no nameplate, just a printed sheet taped to the door that read, "Storage, Inventory." He sat down, stared at the clipboard. Didn't move for a long time. 2 weeks later, a housekeeper found him eating lunch alone in the service corridor, the same corridor where Tessa used to sit with her notebook. He was sitting on the same bench, staring at the same wall. The difference was that Tessa had been building something in that silence. Grant was just sitting in it. Meanwhile, 3 floors above, Tessa Turner stood in her new office. Corner room, 3rd floor. Window overlooking the same ocean she'd been cleaning windows to see for 8 months. Her desk had a nameplate: Tessa Turner, Director of International Relations. HR had fast-tracked her benefits package: full medical, dental, vision. Her mother was transferred to Charleston Medical Center's stroke recovery unit within the week. Better doctors, better equipment, a room with a window, and a call button that actually worked. Tessa called her mother that first evening from the new office. "Mama, I got a new job." "At the hotel?" "At the hotel, but not cleaning." Helen was quiet for a moment. Then, "What did I tell you, baby?" Tessa laughed. For the first time in months, she laughed. "You told me not to let them make me small." "And did you?" "No, Mama, I didn't." That night, Tessa sat at her new desk after everyone had gone home. The ocean was black and silver under the moon. She could hear the waves through the window, something she'd never noticed before. You don't hear waves when you're scrubbing floors. She opened her bag, pulled out the leather notebook, the same one she'd carried in her apron pocket for 8 months. She turned to a fresh page. Portuguese word of the day. She wrote it down, closed the notebook, placed it on the desk beside the nameplate. Same woman, same notebook, different desk. 6 months later, the Pendleton was unrecognizable. Not the building. The building was the same white columns and wraparound verandas, but the energy inside it had shifted. You could feel it the moment you walked through the front door. The concierge greeted guests in 4 languages. The front desk had multilingual signage: English, Mandarin, French, Japanese, Spanish. The restaurant menus included phonetic guides for international guests who wanted to order in their own language. All of it, every piece, built by Tessa Turner's team. She'd hired 8 people in 6 months. Each one spoke at least 3 languages. Each one had a story, a background that didn't fit neatly on a resume, a talent that had been overlooked by someone who couldn't see past a uniform or an accent or the color of their skin. Tessa knew exactly what to look for, because she knew exactly what it felt like to be missed. The Pendleton's international bookings increased by 300% in the first quarter. Travel magazines ran features. A Korean luxury travel blog called it the most globally fluent hotel in the American South. Zhao's investment group cited the International Relations Department as the primary reason for accelerating their renovation timeline. Eleanor Ashford was promoted to regional vice president. She sent Tessa a handwritten note on her last day. 2 sentences. "You changed this hotel, and you changed me." In March, Zhao's company flew Tessa to Shanghai for the Tiansheng Capital Annual Hospitality Summit. 500 attendees. Hotel executives, resort developers, international tourism officials from 11 countries. Tessa was the keynote speaker. She walked onto that stage in a black suit. No apron, no name badge, no cleaning cart. She looked out at 500 faces and began her speech. In Mandarin. Then switched to French. Then Japanese. Then English. 1 language per section, each transition seamless. Each shift met with wider eyes and louder silence. When she finished, the room stood. 500 people. Standing ovation. Raymond Zhao introduced her afterward at the reception. He stood beside her, holding a glass of green tea, the same drink he'd ordered at that terrace dinner in Charleston, and said to a group of investors, "The most impressive person I've met in 30 years of business wasn't sitting in a boardroom. She was cleaning one. And she didn't need anyone to give her permission to be extraordinary. She just needed someone to stop telling her she couldn't be." That night, in her hotel room in Shanghai, a suite this time, not a service corridor, Tessa called her mother. Helen answered on the second ring. She'd been moved to a rehabilitation center 2 months earlier. She was walking again, short distances, with a walker, but walking. "Mama, I just gave a speech in front of 500 people. "In the how many languages?" Tessa laughed. 4. "Only 4? You're slipping." They both laughed. The kind of laughter that carries years inside it. The hard years, the quiet years, the years of cleaning solution and mop buckets and do it again. Helen's voice softened. "Your father would have been so proud, baby." Tessa closed her eyes. "I know, Mama. Now go to sleep, and don't forget your Portuguese." Tessa smiled, opened her notebook, wrote one word. Orgulho. Pride. So tell me, have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked, where you came from, or what job you had? Drop your story in the comments, because I guarantee you, someone out there needs to hear it. If this story hit you the way it hit me, share it. Send it to someone who needs a reminder that talent doesn't have an expiration date, and it damn sure doesn't have a dress code. Subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with me, because the next story, it's even crazier.
It's months of mopping floors, and all it took was one billionaire switching to Mandarin for anyone to notice. Tessa didn't become extraordinary the moment she walked into that conference room. She was extraordinary the entire time. Same 6 languages, same mic that could translate 3 of them simultaneously without glitching. But nobody saw it, because they already decided what a maid was allowed to be. That's the thing about talent. It doesn't disappear when the world stops looking for it. It's a wait, and when the moment comes, and it's always come, it doesn't ask for permission. It's walk through the door and speak perfect Mandarin. So here's what I want you to sit with tonight. What brilliance have you got past a day? Because it was wearing the wrong uniform. And the harder question, what part of yourself have you buried? Because someone once told you it didn't belong. Drop your story in the comments. A time someone underestimated you and lead to regret it. Share this, subscribe, hit the bell, because the next story even crazier.